Okay, let's get started. We have a lot to go over. The first thing that we'll say is that, as you know, this is still kind of a work in progress. Things can change, things probably will change. The hope is they don't change anymore. When we were talking about all this stuff, we were going to kind of slow roll this stuff out piece by piece, but all this new stuff kind of goes together, so we decided to just let it rip and go from there. So, I'm going to give you what it is, and Colby's going to tell you why it is. And we'll just kind of go down the list here. You can certainly ask questions, comments, concerns, but these things all kind of go together. So if you hear something that sounds a little weird, it'll make sense once we get to all the other changes. So,
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think I have a sense of who it is. But you might want to say just for the group who like we is when you say like we are making these changes. Just for clarity.
So yeah, that's just the admins and the moderators. So me, Colby, Warren, Wick, and Asshat are the ones who talk about this stuff. I occasionally will float stuff out to other people just to see, but for the most part, it's us five that are making the calls. So, the first thing we are doing is opening up trades to pretty much be a free-for-all. As long as your roster at the end of the deal ends in compliance, you're good to go. So that you need to have 22 players, you need to have 2 goalkeepers, you need to have exactly 3 designated players, and also new is a maximum of 8 homegrown players. Colby, would you like to explain why we are doing that?
Yeah, so obviously this is going to be a pretty expansive expansion cycle for us with crossplay. We felt like we talked about this in the chat, all of us did, kind of whenever what's going to occur today, everybody floated their ideas. But in general, we want to make sure that we are in a place where we're still rewarding those who are putting in the effort and the time and scouting and building these good rosters, make sure they're still at an advantage. But at the same time, we don't want a situation where, especially with crossplay, if we expand further, that these bottom teams are in a spot where they're so far behind that it's not fun. When we first started this, we definitely didn't expect people to put in as much time as they have into the scouting aspect of it, and that's been really promising to see. But it has created a thing where, all of these young kids are kind of scooped up, and then you had all these players turn in. We have some rosters that have 6, 7 homegrowns already, and these expansion teams it's going to be a cycle or two before they're anywhere in the realm of that. I would guess. We decided on 8 homegrowns as the max. That is subject to change. I am fairly certain it will never be more than that. I could see a scenario where we are more stringent and take more homegrowns away. But for now, that gives you a chance to have a full roster of homegrowns and DPs, starting 11. We also chose that number because nobody, as of the time of this, has 8 homegrowns. So they're not in any scenario where anyone is forced to make a choice immediately on what they're going to do with a player. No one is already at that cap. So that is where we arrived at the number. And luckily with how we do things, where it's, 1 roster download per season, anytime someone hits that cap, it's likely going to be mid-season, and they're going to have time throughout the rest of that season and off-season to figure out what they want to do as far as getting under that cap. And also opening up trades, the big thing for that is we're allowed to now trade homegrown players. So if you're at that number, at that cap, or if you have too many at a position, you can now dump those guys for prospects or however you want to do it. You just can't trade them for a designated player straight up. Obviously, that would not be within the roster rules. But it gives you some flexibility on what you want to do with your roster going forward and gives you ways to build how you see fit. If you're in a situation where you have 2 right backs that are homegrown players, just out of either sheer luck or dropping, however you've done it, you can now dump one of those for 2 18-year-olds if you would like, or an 18-year-old prospect if you'd like, as long as you're meeting the roster guidelines. So that's where we were kind of thinking about that. And like I said, all this stuff's going to tie together. So the trades opening up is because we're going to get to this point where we're going to cap the homegrown numbers. It just gives you options on how you want to deal with it going forward.
Yep, and there were some concerns about shady business going on. If we notice a pattern that's weird, and again, maybe Colby can explain the actual pattern.
I guess
we don't want to say it at all, but like,
sure.
if we notice something, we're just going to say you can't do that. So it's still don't be a dick. It's still all that stuff. So just keep that in mind when you're.
Yep, all transactions are still going to be subject to, proper understanding. What we don't want is a situation where somebody's bailing on the league and trades all their prospects for somebody, or if I don't want someone to trade every 18-year-old they ever get to have a roster of deep, obviously putting caps on it kind of handcuffs you on what you can do. But if you're out here with some sort of malicious intent or trading all your homegrowns just to build an army of 18-year-olds, that's kind of going to ruin the fun for everybody. So still don't be a dick, always rule number one. So that's always going to be the case. So just keep that in mind when you're making deals. I don't think anyone that's going to be active enough to be doing a lot of deals like this is going to be subject to any of this. So, but that's just out there as like an obvious could be downside if someone decides they're bailing and wants to dump their roster or something. So
we just won't let that happen.
Correct. Yeah. Very, very simple.
With this homegrown cap now, we had to figure out a way to... Basically, if we're doing this for a while, these homegrowns are going to kind of turn into designated players, and we wanted to reward people for scouting those players, hanging on to those players. So we've created a third player category. It is the lock and key that you've been seeing in chat for a while, and it is called the Club Legends. A Club Legend will be an homegrown. Once they get to 87 overall, they are recategorized as a Club Legend, and they are keepable. You don't need to drop them if you get relegated. You don't need to drop them between cycles. They do count towards your overall DP allocation, so if one of your players becomes a Club Legend, you can have that and 2 other DPs. So you'll have to do some maneuvering there. And if the Club Legend comes back down below 87, you can make him a homegrown and then pick up a third DP to replace that. So that's the new big thing. If you want to go into detail on that one, Colby, that's Club Legends.
Yeah, so we were at the 87 number. We kind of looked at the amount of 86s and 87s and 88s in the game, trying to figure out where this number should fall. There's a ton of 86s in the game. There's not as nearly as many 87s. So that's where we decide on that 87 number. The big thing here is, again, as the league grows and as people keep gobbling up homegrown players, there's going to be less and less DPs available. And I think that's a pretty important system to how we're running things here. A new player, a new expansion team, someone taking over a weak roster, they always have a chance to even the playing field with designated players if they get a good slot or they just draft their DPs well or something that fits. And that pool is going to get smaller and smaller as we go on. Just as people are keeping these homegrowns or older players retire, like that, just the pool is going to get smaller. Especially, again, with crossplay and as fast as expansion has been, that's just going to be the case. Obviously, the big thing that he mentioned as well is if this player were to hit that threshold and then come back down, you're not going to be punished in any way other than if you're a loaded roster and your homegrown allocation is already full. You're then going to have to make a choice whether you want to drop a homegrown to make that player back to a homegrown to fill your roster requirements and then pick up another DP. Or what's important is if the player drops below an 87, he drops down to an 86, an 85, you can still keep him as a club legend. He never has to lose that if you don't want him to. So he can still fill one of your 3 DPs if you have a full roster of homegrowns. So that still is also important. Again, we think this is a good balancing act of giving those who have done well with roster management I think a pretty nice thing. A player that's an 87, 88, I know it's weird to use real life examples. You're just never going to want to. These players are now above the status of a homegrown. They're marquee players. I think the best way to explain it is, say, I'm going to use Isaac's roster as an example at Arsenal. He's got a ton of homegrowns already. You're going to think Bukayo Saka is going to hit this 87 at some point. Once he does, he has to drop one of his DPs, or if it happens between cycles, he would only get to draft 2 DPs the next cycle. And then say he's relegated, which almost happened last season, which would have been hilarious. He has to drop his 2 DPs, but he gets to keep that Bukayo Saka forever. So under no circumstance does he ever have to lose that player, but it will cause him at some point to get one less other designated player. And that is, again, for roster balancing and just overall a way we're trying to, again, just trying to find that balance between making this still an accessible place for new people to join, even as we get further along on, and rewarding those who are doing a good job.
So one other quick thing, and then we'll open it up for questions, comments, concerns. So when we have a new manager takeover, they will now be allowed to keep up to 2 homegrowns from that current roster. So before, they had to dump everybody. As we keep going, their rosters are going to be at a pretty severe disadvantage if they have to drop everyone. So for now, that number is going to be 2. They can keep 2. They got to drop the rest, and the same other stuff applies. They can swap 3 and 3 before they hit the bottom of the order, the waiver order. That is, after they're done with all their moves. So with that, does anyone have questions, comments, concerns about any of the stuff so far?
Yeah, because like we said, this is still all very, very subject to change as we go on. This is the biggest group of changes we've ever made at one time. Again, the numbers and whether, is 87 always going to be the number? Don't know. Is it always going to be 8 homegrowns? Don't know. That's all going to be kind of subject to change as we go on. It's going to be a testing ground. So if those are your questions, we are going to be, keep monitoring the situation. If FIFA decides to go really wonky with what their ratings are, if it's totally off base from what they've always been, we'll obviously have to adjust at some point. But we wanted to make sure we weren't doing anything. None of these new rule changes would affect any roster as of this moment in time. Like, no one is going to have to scramble to make moves unless one of, I guess, Fizz or Isaac have a couple more blow-ups and they might hit the homegrown. That would be it. Well, or Red Out 925. My apologies.
Technical question. I think it all makes sense, the rating cap and making it 8, so you have a 8 plus 3 is 11. I think that all makes really good logical sense. Or kind of technically, what happens if there's typically a roster update or 2 after trading is closed? So in theory, at some point, someone might exceed the cap and not be in a trading, not have trading available.
Yeah, so obviously we're still, even if there was that would be still mid-season, so we'd still be going after the roster that started that season. So if something, say, Bukayo Saka hits that 87 in the middle of a season, he's not ever going to be that in-game for us because we're using an older roster. So he has until the start of the next season, the next roster download, to get back into. So
there'll be some, because if, let's say, theoretically it happened after trading was closed, obviously they're valid. The roster is valid for the rest of that season. But by the time the window opens again, they will then be out of compliance without having had a trade window.
That'd be in the off season, right? There's a trade window in the off season before the next batch of games would start.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so the trading window stops in the mid-season for the second half and then opens back up again in the off-season. And that's when he'd have to make the roster moves to get back in compliance before match day 1.
Got it. Makes sense.
I expected more questions. It's a lot. But maybe we just did a great job explaining it.
Of course we did.
Got him.
No, it's a lot. I think you guys did a great job with the numbers that you landed on. Not to overcomplicate things, but did you guys give any thought to like a different number, like a threshold for natural homegrowns versus acquired homegrowns, since we can trade for them now? Just kind of a different niche, I guess.
We did not. There are so few rosters that have a lot of homegrowns. We do want to get to we want it to be kind of a free for. We want to see player movement, like we encourage people trading, etc. So if one of these new teams or a team that currently has a roster that is mostly a bunch of young guys and nobody really on that homegrown threshold, they missed out that first go around. If they want to dump some of those guys to get a lower end homegrown, we don't want to make that player less valuable than a different homegrown. So if any way you're going to acquire a homegrown, you're going to be subject to the same benefits and potential problems in the future. So, and I will say the only other number we talked about again was where that club legend number was going to be. Like I said, I just went through and we looked pretty extensively at all the overall ratings, and there's a pretty substantial jump in the number of players that are rated 86 to then 87. And we wanted to err on the high end for now, there shouldn't be everyone walking around with club legends. They should be a special thing. So we want to make sure that's not everywhere.
So if you guys don't have anything else, there's just some other quick stuff we can fly through that not very impactful as other stuff, but it is changing. The 1 week trade window we had at the end of the cycle, that'll be a thing from now on. And then we'll talk about the drafts real quick. So there is a DP draft, a non-DP player draft, and an expansion draft if we're expanding. When there's no expansion, it will still be 4 players you have to cut. When there is expansion, we'll add that other one to make it 5. The DP draft will always be first. The order will always be randomized, and it will always be a snake draft. The teams that were promoted in the season before, when we go through the next cycle, they're guaranteed a top half pick in the order. Relegated teams still go at the bottom, and relegated teams are still not able to pick their DPs from last season. Non-DP draft, same thing. Snake draft, we use the final waiver order as the draft order, so if you finished on top of waiver, you get the first pick in the non-DP draft. The waiver order to start the next season will depend on which way that draft snakes. So if you make the very last pick in the draft, then you have the last pick in the waiver order. I think that makes sense. Whatever makes sense that way is how we'll do it.
Yeah, so going forward, basically, holding your waiver spot towards the end of the cycle is just going to guarantee you that first pick in the non-DP part of the off season. It's not going to give you that top pick once the season starts. So hopefully it leads to some more people towards the end of the cycle, not only playing for waiver picks, since it's going to be a solely the next season off-season draft. But maybe it'll make them do it more so. But yeah, so that's just the key of that going forward, is holding your waiver position at the end of the cycle is just going to put you at the top of the non-DP draft for the next cycle.
I have a comment, and I can see it both ways. So this is more just to create discussion and hear your guys' thoughts on your reasoning behind the decision making. I can see why the waiver is reflected in the non-DP draft in some level. At the same time, it does discourage activity towards the end of the cycle. I mean, we even sent a couple trades where people were. I did one where I'm at the back of the waiver wire. Why wouldn't I pick somebody up and trade them to somebody so they can maintain their waiver? Again, more just for discussion and to hear your thoughts on it. But it does seem like it discourages activity towards the end of the cycle, and maybe that is acceptable. That is the one kind of thing that comes out of that.
Yep. I don't know how much less activity it begots. I think the people that are playing for waiver wire position at the end of the cycle are going to play for it either way. Whether that's if it's they get the waivers to start the next season once the drafts are over, or if that's for part of the draft. I don't think there's any fair way to do it in a sense where waiver wire is an earned thing. Like if you're passing up players, there's got to be some sort of benefit to being the number one pick. And I don't think there's any way, and maybe that is, I think regardless of how you do it for the next cycle, that's always going to be a very valuable thing with the amount of rating changes and potential ratings. Yeah. I don't think there's any way to really combat it at the end of a cycle, other than knowing that expansion teams are going to come in, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of even said what I would have suggested is just make the waiver wire hold, make the non-DP section random like the DP, and then just have the waiver wire stick, for once actual waivers open again. That way teams aren't.
I think Sure. The issue with that is, say there's a player right at the end of the cycle where all of our moves are done for the cycle that obviously has come onto the scene but not in the game. That person that has the number one waiver pick should be eligible to get that player. And if we remove that player, is going to be eligible in the draft that's upcoming. So they have to have the number one pick there to be eligible for like the number one star out there that should be. They obviously held that waiver position waiting for something like that to come along. And then just because of the timing, they don't get the first dibs. Doesn't sit exactly right. But I see what you're saying, 100%.
No, I mean, I see it both ways. I don't mean this to argue, but my devil's advocate point would be that if if everybody knew that their spot wasn't going to be good for the non-DP draft, no one would be holding the waiver wire, right? So you wouldn't have somebody that like was holding it for 3 months and then was just SOL because that person, I can think of one player already. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be a punishment or a detriment because it just wouldn't. No one would be freezing their waiver spot with that goal in mind. But I can see either way.
I think it would be a punishment to the person that is holding it if they just deemed that nobody there was worth a number one pick on the waiver wire, and then they're hoping that that player comes available during the draft. But yeah, I mean, again, it can go either way.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, more just for discussion. It's interesting. I can see both.
Anything else?
I have a question.
Yep.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. For the people who received pity promotions, are they still considered in the top half of the DP draft, or is it just the people who won the league or won the promotion tournament?
The draft order has been set. The pity promotions were included in the promotion category. The saved from relegation people were not included in the relegation category.
Congrats on your gift, Roth262.
Yeah, big time.
Sounds great. I love everything I've heard so far.
Wow, that's a first from Roth262. Loving everything.
So that's pretty much it for the new rules. I'm going to go put all this stuff in the channels and in the roster sheet while you guys talk about the other stuff we're going to talk about. Very quickly, just a couple things. The cup, we are trying to figure out how to award buys, I guess, in technically buys, or more just excluded from the first round draw. The original plan was to just throw everybody into a list, and the top however many teams make up the first round. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't remember, but those people would play. The other people wouldn't. I think instead we are definitely going to give all of the division winners a bye or exclusion from that first round. The previous cup winner will be excluded, and then probably some number of D1 teams in the standings from last season to fill out however many we need to fill out, but we'll kind of figure that out a little later. That's the plan right now. As far as expansion is concerned, 4 of the places are filled. We still have 6 places that are up for grabs in D4. Not everyone who's playing the tournament right now, not everyone on the list is going to get in, so there's still decisions to be made there. Even if we do get a bunch of new interests and once this game comes out, we're not going to do a D5 this cycle. It's not going to happen. We probably won't expand ever in between or during the cycle. It will only be an in-between thing just because of the way that drafts work and dropping people and all that jazz. The controller settings, don't ask. We're not going to deal with any of that until the game is fully out and we can play the game with the new settings and whatnot and figure that out. I wouldn't expect there to be changes, but you never know. We've said that before, and that's how we ended up with 80 goals in D3 because through balls were insane.
Correct, yeah.
I won't ask for your cut players until the full roster's up. If you know who you want to cut, that's great, but I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to take a list. I'm not going to mark it until that full roster's out. The teasers, the little clips I've been posting, little images, not ready yet. So that will not be revealed until next week probably. You'll see that we have new avatars you all got. We have an additional winner's avatar, so the gold will be for the D1 playoffs. You'll get the silver one if you won the D1 regular season, and you'll get a blue one for the cup. Lastly, we are talking about merch again with our scarf that we forgot to offer when we did our first merch stuff. If you have ideas on design or text or colors or whatever, let us know in that channel. We'll probably just mock 3 up and have a vote, and whichever one is liked the most is the one we'll make. I'm not sure how much more merch we'll be doing after that, but never say never. but right now it kind of seems like we've saturated the market a little bit, so the scarf might be the last thing for a while. So if you want one of those, speak up, let us know, and we'll get that done hopefully before Christmas, but however long it takes is how long it takes. So if you guys don't have any other questions about that, we can move on to FIFA 23 Jazz, and I'm going to mute myself and go do some typing.
I will say that Adidas dry fit shirt that was in the last round is awesome. I wear it all the time for like working out and playing basketball and stuff, soccer. So if there was going to be something that was re-around, that thing's awesome.
Yeah, all the merch stuff was just so good. So hopefully we get another drop of it all for people who missed the first time, or obviously with a lot more users coming in who might want to partake. But merch was high quality at good prices. So Uber did a really good job with that. Regardless if all the teasers for what Rez had been teasing wasn't ready, you can direct all comments and concerns and complaints about that to Uber your regular season champion.
Bobby is also on the merge team if you want to talk to him too.
Yes, if you need a Ass Dart magnet, that is also where you will message.
They got delivered today, by the way. Got delivered. I will post pictures shortly after this.
Does anyone with the FIFA 23 beta want to talk about what they've played at fear of being arrested and thrown in jail by EA for violating NDA?
I was going to say the through balls do seem a little harder on semi. They've supposedly made them more, user
skill.
Yeah, that they say it. Well, I mean, we'll see. I don't know.
Of course, yeah, that'll always be the thing. And then obviously there's the new setting for manual over the top through balls. There's some sort of manual setting for that now, or lobbed throughs.
Yeah, lobbed through balls. It's just manual or semi on the mat. I don't see an auto option, but that may be because the master switch is on. So right now it's just manual or semi.
Gotcha.
I haven't played with manual yet.
Gotcha.
Is there a key to unlocking the other game modes it said I was going to be able to play? Like they're all blacked out right now, like the friendlies, seasons, etc.
Sure. I just know. Yeah, I've had the beta every year until this one since like FIFA 18, and day one has been a disaster 99.9% of the time. So I would say just keep an eye out. It usually pops at some point for everybody. But day one is almost always a disaster, which I know is not shocking, given that it's EA Sports.
The play mode, the pro clubs like mini games, I was even messing around with those. And if you press sprint, which is also the menu button to bring up your friend menu, it pops up. So you can't even really sprint in the mini games. It's a mess. Long story short.
Well, again, not that surprising. Hopefully they fix it so you can at least get a feel for things.
Yeah.
Because
bringing up a menu overlay when you're in game is a pretty big.
That's a pretty big miss. I think
you get any game mode working. It's like it always crashes when you first.
For what it's worth, I know historically the beta we get is usually like a 2.5-month-old build. That's normally what they beta size. At least that's what the forums and the people that used to combat said. So hopefully the major things, but it usually is a 2+ month old build. Because I'd say the mini games in pro clubs is about the only thing that's very exciting about pro clubs. Just a way to keep up with the Joneses when no one else is on if you want to grind your player. So, because no one's ever going to play drop-ins, etc. So hopefully those work and are not boring. Anyone else have anything to say about FIFA 23? I think
skill games are slightly more interesting if I could play them.
What's that? Oh, skill games, yeah.
The skill games
definitely
slightly cooler than they used to be.
Yeah. I mean, what they say, there's like 60 plus of them now. So,
yeah.
I think that's, again, the only noticeable thing to pro clubs that's going to matter. I don't want to... Everything I know about FIFA 23 is foot-based, so I'm not going to clog the talking TSL thing with foot news.
I don't want to bog down on pro clubs either, but the skill tree does look a lot. They don't hide the interesting skill point or like skill attributes behind like ones no one ever uses. So they're kind of more. There's a few exceptions, but for example, like if you just want to upgrade agility it's all a straight line down one side. You don't have to like
Yeah,
unlock attacking positioning or something stupid like that. So that's a nice little.
yeah, that does look nice. The skill tree looks good. Hopefully, the overall. I mean, I'm still always going to be skeptical. They say every year they're tried to tune the match ratings for midfielders and defenders, and it's never happened correctly. So I still remain skeptical. And I know they said all of the, because now it's level 0 to 100 cross with Volta, like your rate, your rank or whatever. And I know they said all the perks are unlocked within the first 25 levels, so you don't have to grind. I mean, how many, I've played 600, 700 games of pro clubs, or I guess close to like 500, and I still don't have all the perks unlocked. So hopefully that's a welcome change. But
Yeah, I think they made some incremental changes. Nothing game changing like we'd hope. I think we all are aware they're never going to put any effort into it, but
it is
some
wild.
quality of life.
It's wild. They're obviously putting more effort into Volta than they are, and I know they're trying to like make the two compatible, like force like both ways you're earning towards the same ranking. But I just can't fathom that more people care or want to play Volta versus clubs. So I don't really know the reasoning behind it. Roth, have you played much of the FIFA beta yet, or?
I have, yeah. It's definitely weird. Like you can feel that the game moves a little different. I can't tell if that's just like it being like kind of sluggish because, like you said, it's like an older build.
Sure.
The power shot is, I'm very afraid of what that's going to be like. I mean, granted, the opening games with PSG, so I was doing it with Messi and Mbappe, but I mean that thing is like it's just a rocket. But I'd say on the whole, kind of looks interesting. I mean, the trainer updates, which is like defaulted on, definitely are pretty over the top graphically. So it seems like at least they're putting some type of attention into like little things.
You said it's super helpful for player switching.
The player switch, like, I mean, on those rare instances when you would switch players and like it would switch to someone random and you'd lose like where the icon was, like that's completely impossible with this. It's like a huge bullseye like on the guy you switch to, and it's just like, oh, there it is. Like even on the times when you switch to the wrong guy by accident, it's like so easy to flip it right back. But knowing the way at least from what I've looked in the settings, it's not like you can pick, which trainer things you want on and which ones you don't. So it's pretty much like all or nothing.
Sick. Love that. Love to have useful features hid behind shit ones.
There was I found a menu, Brothel. I can send it to you. I found the menu where you can like pick which trainer things you want on or off.
Like I said, always going to be an option. Way to go, Broth, idiot.
It's nice, but it's also really distracting too. Like, I don't know. I just like a cleaner overlay, but if somebody finds it useful, then that's great.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to using some of the trainers always. Yeah,
I mean, the camera angles are different as well, which is going to take some getting used to. I haven't been able to get it to look like it did last cycle, so that'll be fun.
I've read that feedback as well, that lots of different camera angles. They've definitely tried to make it feel more like a television experience from all camera angles, it seems like.
Yeah.
I would say I concur that power shots are the thing I'm most worried about in the game, and I don't know if it'll be as big of an issue on our settings, but maybe it will be. I hope not. But obviously, with a supposed complete overhaul on all semi settings, from semi through balls to semi shooting, like with a increased skill gap supposed to be added. I'm assuming semi shooting actually got touched for the first time in a while, so I don't know if that's going to be a buff like semi through balls were, or a nerf in some way. I guess we'll have to see once the game comes out.
I mean, if you take him at face value, it makes semi shooting more skillful, like you said. Like,
Sure.
If you're aiming accurately in the goal frame, it'll be better for you.
Sure.
But a high rated player that knows what they're doing, yeah. But anyway, we'll see what the execution is. That's always the rub with EA, obviously.
Anyone have anything to say about the set pieces that have dabbled? That's obviously from what I've seen, the biggest gameplay standout thing that just immediately jumps at you when you see screenshots is the difference in the set pieces. Whether that be
I did a corner kick and that blew my mind.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
line
I
and
was
then
gonna
where you kick the
say
ball. And
that's all I've had as well. I've only played a couple of games, but I had one corner kick, and my mind was blown. Completely different setup.
yeah, I'm a little worried anytime they overhaul a system, it's almost always too OP. So I'm hoping that it's not straight up like aim your stick here and the free kick goes in and aim your stick here and it's a perfect cross every time. So hopefully some variation in that. But it definitely looks interesting, and I think it was very well, like the entire system's needed an overhaul for sure.
It's going to be super weird on corner kicks, especially because like you can't see the box, like you're at the corner, so like how like is the defender going to have so much advantage by being able to see where everyone is, and you're sort of just like kicking into a general area?
It's a great point.
Sort of what that player switch is like.
Yeah, because it's basically giving you like the normal like direct free kick angle from behind the player, right? Even
exactly.
Yeah,
In the corner of the field. Yeah,
that's gonna make
It definitely looks cool. It definitely looks really cool, and it makes more sense, like from an actual soccer perspective, where you're trying to think about where you strike the ball to create different loft and curve and whatnot. Again, all in the execution. I haven't drawn a free kick yet, but I did get a couple penalties. It's a really cool mechanic. I mean, not having any idea where your guy's aiming is probably good, but it's a little disconcerting when you're standing over the ball.
Yeah.
It's weird. I'm open-minded to
anything that stops the inconsistency of the shaking reticle. Like sometimes I can hand it or like put it top corner, like and hold it still for an hour, and sometimes the game was like that's just not happening. So who knows?
I think that's still happening. You just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean that's probably true.
It kind of gives you feedback when you get to the post.
Gotcha.
So I don't know. Anyway, we'll see. I only did a couple, so it's not like I was doing the skill games and just practicing. But
All the notes I saw about the penalties said that they were putting more emphasis on player composure for that, so maybe that's the influence there. I'm not sure because I haven't had one, but
I think that is the speed at which the little circle around your player for the timing mechanism is. I think that's way slower on players that are really good at penalties because there is still the timing aspect. You don't see your aiming yourself, but you have like that little circle around your player, and the smaller it gets, the more composed and better the aiming is. And more power. So I think that's where the composure thing comes in. Because I saw somebody taking a free kick with some center back that wasn't any good, and that circle was moving pretty quick.
There is two different stats though, right? There's your penalty rating and your composure rating. So I wonder how they interact. I'm not sure.
Knowing EA, we will probably get those numbers on what the percentage things make up in a pitch notes when it comes to foot gameplay or gameplay changes. Somebody's going to say at some point, like we have to tell them because I'm assuming like both the aiming and the timing are a mix of your penalty stat and your composure stat. So I'm assuming they'll tell us like which affects which more. So anyone else have anything about FIFA 20?
Composure. Anyway, we can just let it go. It's not worth. I was just gonna say it makes sense if the composure like affected the circle going in and out, and then your penalty rating affected like how accurate you were
and how hard you hit it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that totally makes sense. Anybody else? Anything about FIFA 23 before we move on to the last subject here on Talking TSL? All right, so open the floor for anyone have anything to say so far about the farewell tournament. I think personally it's gone pretty well again. The high level of interest for an off-season tournament, getting this many people to be tuning into matches and talking about them in August is no small feat, especially outside of league. And I'd say this engagement is even more so than last year. I think that is an overall positive, regardless of the setup or what you think of it. I think it's been another success, even though Warren is obviously going to win it by 1,000 goals. Other than that, very good. Any other thoughts about the tournament?
I think it's great. I think it's great because it, besides the farewell and say goodbye, like I said, it's just a good learning tool for the newbies to get acclimated with everything, the rules and the play style and all that.
100%. And I know I said something in the chat earlier about that, somebody else, but especially like some of you guys that have been around for a long time, some of you guys that know the rules, know etc. You're going to play some of these new guys in this tournament. If you feel like something was quote unquote shady or something was a little off. A lot of these guys are really, really willing to learn. And again, like that guy earlier, he never doesn't even play FIFA online really. So make sure you're just pulling them aside and like giving them how we do things. Don't let the result make you call them a name in the chat, or don't get upset with people. It's the off season. I mean, I'm using a half-star Chinese team. Don't get mad at people. Like, just let them know, like, hey, like, I know you're new here. Like, this is how we do things. Or bring it to an admin and be like, hey, so this is what he did. Like, if you don't feel comfortable approaching someone, let one of the admins who have been around a while do it. Because I said most of them are willing to learn and listen. So don't just immediately go in the chat and blow them up. Come to one of us, or go to them yourself and just be like, hey, like, welcome, but here's what I thought after playing you. This is what I would work on if you want to stick around and not have people mad at you. So just be cool about it.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Just to kind of piggyback on what you said there. I've played a bunch of new guys so far, whether it's friendlies or tournament play, and most of the communication is done via DM. It's the best way to learn, for them to ask questions without feeling stupid, I guess. Like, you're in a big group of guys who've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I still think of myself as a newer guy, even though I just completed my second cycle here. Been here since the Dynasty started, so I like to think of myself as a resource for how the game is played in terms of TSL standards now. I got, I guess, a little bit defensive earlier for another new guy from what I think is another new guy. And, basically stepped up, said, hey, no need to say shady. Just talk to him in a DM, handle it that way. And if there's issues, go to an admin. I think that's the way to handle things here. We like to go with sportsmanship and having fun. Like, it's a video game at the end of the day. We're here to relax and escape from our lives temporarily. So don't make it a place where we can't all enjoy ourselves,
Well, you put FIFA and relax in the same sentence, but I get your point.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yep. So that's basically it.
Not be excused for his behavior, but that's for us to worry about.
Yeah.
Also correct. So, yeah. I mean, that is again, and you're absolutely right. You have been here for 8 seasons at this point. I know it's crazy to think about 2 cycles. But yeah, absolutely. Just pull them into a DM. Let them know. And if you feel like they're somebody who's not willing to learn or not constructive criticism, and they're a new guy who's trying to get a spot here, also feel free to take that to the admins. We take that stuff to heart. We watch games. We listen to feedback from our guys that we trust in the league. So if you play a new guy and he doesn't want to adhere or doesn't want to hear what you have to say when it comes to gameplay stuff, just let us know. Easy enough.
Yeah.
No need for any of this to be contentious.
A new Jimmy, as I'll call him, it's actually a friend of mine. I was talking to him about it afterwards and just kind of, explaining what you said to him, Colby, about just like spamming type thing. And I watched it back. It really wasn't. There's, several times it was used type thing. But, I mean, he's real excited about the league. So hopefully it doesn't, put any detriment on him,
But it won't. He very well seemed willing to listen and learn and be like, hey, I'll keep an eye on it. Like, so that's all it's got to be.
He's a good dude, so.
All it's got to be. Any other comments about so far what's going on in the tournament, other than Red Wings getting shit-housed by 48 overall center mids?
Okay, that was pretty cool to watch.
A highlight of my tournament, that's for sure.
Comedy.
I loved it. I'm just going to say Stolby because I don't want that smoke.
I think that's playing you is a little different than playing Red Wings. Hey, bright side is we get to do it again.
I just really hope I have to run into High Bye or Hey Bay or whatever the hell you call them.
I guess it would be, yeah. I wouldn't want to run into Warren and the Ben Yetter show, personally. Like, that's what you really don't want. Feels like a lot of folks are playing for second at the moment, because that is a really, that's a good FIFA team. And obviously, Warren is maybe the best player here. So when you're one of the best players with one of the best teams, well, yeah, a good FIFA team, I should say. Like, I'm not gonna say they're PSG or anything, but if no one else has really any much else to add to the tournament discussion, I think we can pretty much call it a wrap on the episode. Like you said, the big thing for today was just getting all those rules out there and making sure if anybody had any questions, try to get them on the agenda. I think we did a pretty extensive job trying to think of all of the what could happens when we made these changes. So we tried to cover it all, but we figured there'd be some stuff we missed or some questions, and there very well could be as we go on. I'd expect there to be. So if there's any questions in the off season, obviously feel free to bring that to one of the admins or bring it to the chat. I'm sure someone will have an answer or have an idea on how we can fix problems that do come up. Like I said, a lot of I know we talked that it's a 5-man admin team or whatever, but everything that we discussed today and all these changes did come from the chat that day. So that was ideas thrown out from multiple sources on what we thought we should do going forward. We very much expected it to be a slow rollout, and it became these kind of all have to be tied together in no time, like the biggest expansion we've ever had to just do it. There was no negative, I don't think. So anyone else have any parting words before we head out of here?
All good. You guys are doing a great job, as always. I've been here forever, and I always loved the league. So thank you for taking the time of doing it, getting us a space to play this stupid game. And yeah, just keep on playing.
Fearless Leader, Red L, 925er. Anything you want to say before logging off?
No.
All right.
I'm still typing.
Well.
Man of many words.
Yeah, well, that's shocked you got most of an episode out of him. So, man, he's the fearless leader of few words, but many words in text form. All right, so I think we can just put a wrap on that. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for all the questions and the commentary. And we'll see you next time. And hopefully, next time we talk, we'll be on FIFA 23. So, all right, everybody have a good night.